Welcome to your 12-minute HR lesson. Today, we're going to talk about how we need to make cold warm and how we need to make hot cooler. We're going to start off by talking about the Cold War, and then we're going to talk about how you can be that voice of moderation that gets us to lukewarm in the workplace. So let's go. I try to avoid the trap of hot takes. Hot takes are making grand and provocative statements to capture people's interest and intrigue. The problem with hot takes is that people also instinctively diminish them. The creator puts out these, oh, this is so important, this is so amazing, and the listener tones that down subconsciously. Oh yeah, okay, how much is that really? But I'm going to start with talking about two people who I genuinely believe, absolutely categorically believe, are two of the greatest men in modern history, if not the history of the world, for their one single act of greatness. They did one single thing that, for that one act, we owe them so much. And the greatness of their only matched by their absolute anonymity and obscurity. And that's grossly unfair. So let me tell you who they are. These two men are Stanislav Petrov and Vasili Arkhipov, both of which were Soviet officers during the Cold War who actively took steps to stop or actively put a stay against what they ought to have done that stopped us from escalating to a nuclear war. So let's talk about them briefly. Let's start with Vasili Arkhipov. He was a naval officer on a submarine, underwater, not in contact with anybody else, and they were being depth charged by the US Navy. So the US Navy was firing depth charges at them, trying to get them to surface. The crew were looking at the situation, knowing that tensions were extremely high, finding themselves being under fire, no communication with Moscow to find out what's going on, formed the very reasonable conclusion that the Cold War had turned hot and are now being fired upon. So the captain made the decision to retaliate with the weapons available, which included a nuclear torpedo. Arkhipov refused to authorize the launch. Everybody, including the captain and crew, were like, right, let's go, we're in a war, let's fire. He refused to authorize. Had he fired a nuclear torpedo on the US Navy likely would have started retaliating. And as soon as navies are firing off the coast of Cuba, there's a very, very good chance that nukes would have started flying between the two countries. Now let's talk about Stanislav Petrov. Similar thing in 1983. He was a lieutenant colonel in charge of a Soviet air defense base. They got early warnings that a nuclear strike was incoming. But instead of following protocol and doing what he ought to do when a nuclear strike is underway, he refused to launch those nuclear weapons. His standing orders were, when you receive these warnings, you hit that fire button. But he refused to do so because he decided it was a false alarm. I believe what happened is that NATO was undergoing drills and had forgotten to tell the Russians, as they previously always had, to avoid these situations. Both of these men chose to do the right thing instead of the correct thing, despite years of conditioning, despite years of orders, years of obedience. They chose to do the right thing that the rest of us owe them a huge debt of gratitude for. So let's zoom out. And this is where I cover the Cold War in extremely simplistic version. To keep it really simple, we had two extremely well-armed governments in an extremely tense relationship, essentially at war with each other as they were as close to at war with each other without firing a shot. Now we are talking about two situations in which very easily that circumstances could have escalated to a firing war that would have resulted in the loss of most of their populations, if not the rest of the world. A situation where you have two countries with huge amounts of tension, but not doing anything, with potentials that could have taken the situation from 0 death to 10 out of 10 death within an hour, from no one dying from this war to hundreds of millions dying from this war in a very, very short period of time. What did we want to have in that situation? Ideally, what we wanted to have is that cold period being warmed up slowly, or if we got really hot, we wanted that hot situation cooled down. And that's the topic of today's discussion. Heating up cold and cooling down hot. So how is the Cold War relevant to the workplace? It's a very good question. You may have spotted it as soon as you saw the title, the question of heating up and cooling down. And it goes like this. We see conflict as endemic to a workplace. It's always there. I'm not someone who thinks that conflict is pathological. I'm not someone who thinks that everything is fine until suddenly something happens. There's always a level of conflict between someone and somewhere, and that's normal human behavior. What we often see is there's a certain tipping point in this conflict. Often what we see is that managers are slightly frustrated with their employees. For instance, they're getting negative feedback from co-workers. They're getting little complaints, all things that they're observing directly, that they're late, that they're not turning up, that they're not doing good work, that they're unavailable when they should be available online. All these little things. And often managers are, often this information is at that sub-actionable level. Sometimes it's at that point where the manager is going, okay, I can see this, I'm not too concerned about it, but if it gets worse, then I'm going to deal with it. And this is normal and that is understandable. But where that line is often can be a little bit skewed. Often that line can be in the wrong place. So often what we find ourselves dealing with is suddenly managers highly frustrated, highly unhappy with an employee. Suddenly this needs to be solved immediately. Suddenly we're talking managers down from pretty extreme perspectives. Oh, they have to go. We've been putting up with this for ages. I need to give them a warning. They need to go. We need to start talking exit packages. Suddenly the situation's gone from a cold war to a very hot war. We've gone from 0 out of 10 to 10 out of 10. So what is the solution to this? Now, I can't talk about every situation because there's so many different types, but I can say what's best for us, best for them, best for the business. Almost all of the time is in that lukewarm middle spot. We're dealing with things rather than not dealing with them. We're warming it up rather than it being cold. But we're dealing with it before it gets to that point of manager frustration where they are going, I can't be dealing with this anymore. They're grumpy, they're impatient, they're frustrated, and they're at the end of their tether, and we're having to start a process from 0. Ideally, what we really want, and what the business really wants, is lukewarm. Trying to coax and encourage managers to deal with problems is far better than trying to cool down hot. It's far better that we are prompting them to be proactive about an employee that isn't quite doing what they ought to be doing than we are trying to de-escalate a manager who is trying to pull some pretty serious levers. So how do we deal with that? What do we do? There's lots of different ways of dealing with, but here's one takeaway for you. The best way to do this is management by walking around. So whenever I worked in environments where everybody was in the same place, everybody was on a single site, I would always find some reason to walk the site every day. Partially it was just to get me out of my office, to give me a different scene, but often I would be visible to all managers so that if they did want to talk to me about something, I was very accessible for them to do so. If it's one of my key managers, I'd be talking to them, popping in, standing in their doorway once a day. I used to say my office is not my office is other people's doorways. And what this gives me is it gives them an opportunity to talk to me at that problem level rather than emailing me or calling me when things are getting hot, when they are getting frustrated. So the more that I can make myself accessible for people to bring things to me early, the better. Now, you might not be able to do this if everybody's not on the same side. How do you do it? What you do is you find reasons to call people. Lots of short, sharp phone calls is much more effective than emails. I'm not a fan of emails. I always find emails are best used for evidence of communication than actual communication, but that's a topic for another day. A short, sharp phone call with the manager can often be more efficient than writing an email backwards and forwards, but it also opens up that window for them to say, hey, while I've got you, or while you're here. They're not going to do that in an email, but they are going to do that in a phone call. And that allows you to be in that warming up cold rather than cooling down hot space. One of the articles that I've published on our website is Can I Borrow Your Watch? In which I'm making the point that really what I'm doing is bringing forth things that you already know. And today is no exception. I know that you've always felt like a Soviet-era officer in charge of a submarine. I know that you've felt like that person. And I'm just bringing you that truth that you always knew. I don't have any way to end that tongue-in-cheek joke. As always, thank you for listening. As always, please have a look at our website to see the services that we offer, to see the HR training courses that we put on for you. And also have a look at those articles that I've written there as well. You might find them interesting. If you're not interested in engaging us for our services, that's not a problem. Please like us via whatever social media you found us on. That's just your way of paying us back. It's a small price to pay. It's like slacktivism. Clicking a like button actually does get us somewhere in this situation. But other than that, I'll catch you next time. Thanks a lot.